Welcome back to the Phasing Line podcast. I am Marty, KC1CWF.
And I'm Sterling in 0SSC.
And this is another episode. We are back. We survived. And I guess, I don't know how, but we made it. We're going to do it again this week.
Somehow. It's quite a miracle. I'm just constantly blown away and super excited and all of this and the other thing. Not to downplay, not that I sound too bored or anything, but oh my gosh, this podcast is like a hit. Everybody seems to really enjoy it. It's totally something fresh, and I'm really, really, really glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's always exciting every week. Like, as soon as we release, I can like wake up the next day. You know, often we've been releasing at night now, and I can like log into the website where we host the content and see like all the downloads. And see, like, all over the world. And it's great to know that we're not just talking to ourselves, and there's people who are listening.
Yeah. And that's the whole point. Like, I mean, we could talk to ourselves, and to be honest, like, that's what we are basically doing. And
we do that anyways.
If nobody listened, if maybe one person listened, then it'd all be worth it. But even if, but now that we have, like, thousands on our first episode, we had, 2,000? Like, on track for the month?
Or yeah, we're doing
something up into that, like maybe 1,700. I don't know. It was well over 1,000. That's for sure, and that is so cool. So thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah, we appreciate it. It's really fun to make these shows when you know you're just talking to a friend like we do. I mean, we're not scripted. Sterling combs his beard, but like
yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm every single day, and word that I say is completely scripted. And in fact,
yeah, we have teleprompters actually.
Yeah, no. Just kidding, everybody.
No, we're kidding. I am the least scripted person I know.
Yeah, I've definitely had bad experiences with scripts. It makes you sound nasally and like you're reading off of a page and like you're doing a review for gear. And getting away from that script just makes it feel more like you are a friend. You got a friend in me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you just got a song second, right? Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. But I think it's really cool. And we at least try to create like a very open, communicative, friendly environment. And I think that's a cool part of the show thus far. Maybe it won't work. We will see in the future. But I think this week has been a pretty dang cool ham week, or the last couple weeks, I guess we should say.
Yeah. So what have you done in your week in ham radio?
Well, I guess most recently, I've been very busy with school, but the one thing I did most recently, just a weekend back, is the ARRL 160 contest, CQ ARRL 160.
Yeah.
Which was just a lot of fun. I didn't actually get to do a lot of operating, but I was heavily involved with readying a local station to get ready for the contest, and I gotta say it was quite an adventure.
That's cool. Yeah, I really love the 160 contest. It was always the one after sweepstakes at W0EEE, and it was just sort of like interesting because you're thinking like, 160 meters, that's a real long wavelength. This is just right above the broadcast band on the AM broadcast dial, and the signals, you would think like during the day you can't hear anything at all, but at night it all opens up and it's all kind of like a cool top band sort of thing. But as you're definitely
you need real antennas.
You're going to need a big antenna, because with a big wavelength you got to have a big antenna. Same goes for 80 meters, but just imagine you need an antenna that's twice as big for 160. So
and especially on 160, where especially as I think 160 is also going to be kind of on an upshoot now. We're on the downward spiral of a solar cycle. We're going downhill. We hit the peak and now we're crawling down. And if the conditions recently are a projection of what's coming in the future, we don't have much good coming our way.
It's definitely on the downtrend.
Yeah, but with 10 gone and 15 marginal, this is where a lot more activity kind of shifts to the low bands, and getting a really good antenna on 160 is pretty dang cool. So this fall, I spent a lot of time building a new antenna on 160 at a friend's station, K1VR. We erected basically like a 3-element vertical array. So it's 3 vertical 160 verticals that slope away from a tower. So they're all attached at 100 feet, and then they all slope down.
So it's kind of like a guy wire? Except not a guy wire?
It's not really a guy wire, but it could be envisioned as the same sort of slope.
Like it's coming down from the middle of the tower in a 45-degree slope. So
yeah, it's a little bit less than 45 degrees because it starts at 100 feet. And it's a 120-foot wire. But they all come down to probably 70 feet away from the tower, 60, 50 feet maybe. And they are all elevated in the trees, probably around 15 feet each. They're up off the ground. The feed points are. And then we have, I believe, three, or depending on the vertical, we have a radial or two elevated that works well. You really got to get a couple radials up elevated, at least.
Oh, yeah.
Four are ideal.
Since you're dealing with the vertical, how high up was the feed point in these radials, out of curiosity?
The feed point is at 10 feet. The top of it, the antenna, is at 100 feet. And then what we do is we designed a box that utilizes 3/8 wave 50 ohm coaxes going to a custom box we built. So basically, when you're using one of the sloping verticals, the other two are grounded, which makes them look like parasitic reflectors. So you basically end up with around 15 dB of front to back and a couple dB of gain.
Oh, wow. Now we're getting technical.
And it's very simple because you either are using an antenna or it's grounded.
Yeah, that does sound. So you're using a piece of. Explain the coax again. You said 3/8. Is that a wavelength? 3/8 wavelength long.
3/8 wavelength on 160.
So this might, if you know what a stub is, or a what's another, like a phasing line.
It's not a phasing line at all. It's the feed line for each antenna is 3/8 wave long.
Okay.
And those three feed lines are actually elevated just to get them out of so people don't walk on them and like
gotcha.
Grass can get mowed. And they come to 20 feet on the tower, then they run down the inside of the tower. I spent plenty of time on the inside, climbing up and down the tower, getting that all squared away. And then they go down to this box which we built, which basically you can either think of it as an antenna switch, but when you're not using one of the two of the other three antennas, those antennas are then shorted to ground.
I see. So you can
they act as parasitic reflectors.
And you have three directions. Every time you're using one antenna, the other two are off. And then you can switch that around the tower, I guess, clockwise and counterclockwise.
So for example, in New England, you got one going to Europe, one going to South America, and one going west. And it's compared to what we see with like a Foursquare, it's not as good, but it takes up a lot less room. And it's pretty elegant, and we've been pleased with it so far. We've only had it up a couple weeks now, but we were very loud in Europe on 160, cool. Which is always terrific. So that seemed to work.
I never got out pretty much beyond Maryland or California. It's all been continental for me on 160.
Yeah, high verticals or high dipoles really rule on 160.
Yeah, on for DX too.
With power is helpful. Although we went low. K1EP, the person who used this station this weekend, actually went low power, and he made 800 contacts on 160.
Oh my goodness.
Which isn't shabby.
And that's low power. You got to make sure that you're not near a thunderstorm when that happens, because 160 and 80 and a little bit of 40, they're super, super, super susceptible to noise and lightning and QRN, not just QRM, but a little bit of QRN.
Static,
Yeah, and it all gets loud down there, and the signals make up for it. Like, it's not like the upper bands, like 20 meters and up, where the noise floor is super quiet and all you hear is signals. You have to deal with all of the noise from even thunderstorms in like South Africa could be causing, or not South Africa, just Africa in general, or like South America, could be causing all kinds of, havoc on 160 or 80 for you.
Yeah, QRN is a complex subject, but the way on 160, transmit vertical antennas especially are susceptible to noise. There's a lot of people who say verticals are noisy. Well, that's not completely true.
As opposed to like horizontals, because I think the rationale is vertical is noise because that's what the power lines are, or something like that, and horizontal isn't noise because the power lines aren't horizontal.
Well, I think it's that most noise is a lot of electrically generated, a lot of noise that common household noise is often vertically polarized, but that could be complete BS. I knew it was somewhat false.
Because if you listen to me, power lines are definitely not vertical. I mean, the poles are vertical, but the lines are all horizontal. So you'd imagine it's all horizontally polarized. But yeah, there's a little bit, like a lot of talk about the about noise and electrical arcing and all of that stuff having a strong...
Yeah, power line noise is that's a big deal.
Yeah, and all of that having a strong like vertical component. But noise comes from all directions and all polarizations, so there's no one antenna that will fix like all of the noise. So you have to use a number of things. Some work, some don't. Some are snake oil. Some are like, just what the doctor ordered.
I think one of the key things that a lot of people are kind of missing these days, I think more new hams than anything, is you got to have receive antennas, especially on 160. And I think, especially now more than ever, technology is making it possible to have really good receive antennas on 160. And there'll be a lot of times, sure, when you won't be able to hear the signal at all. But if you listen on the right receive antenna, there'll be S9, So we use, kind of the old school method is things like beverages. Long wires terminated at one end, typically.
Yeah, beverage is a long wire that goes. It's horizontally, so it's just above the ground, not too high, like less than the wavelength, less than a tenth of a wavelength. Really?
No, we most of the beverages I've strung are typically at around 6 feet or so.
Yeah, super low to the ground, and as such, they have a super high directionality. And they're named beverage after the guy who invented them, which I'll use my Google foo, but basically, it's also known as a traveling wave antenna, where the signal propagates down the length of the line, and it doesn't get any propagation on the side of it, so you get a really strong bidirectional
bidirectional is unterminated. Watch it there.
Right.
So
let me finish. When you terminate one end with a 50 ohm resistor to ground, then you lose one, you null out that side, and then you get just one unidirectional beam pattern. It's
not 50 ohms. Typically, I'll correct you here. It's not typically 50 ohms. Typically, people say in the range from like 400 to 600 ohms.
Okay.
Is most effective. So 470 is kind of the standard. But you can actually tune beverages. That's a thing.
Yeah. Do you have to tune them by lengthening and shortening them, just like a regular antenna?
I think you can also alter the termination. I'm not a huge expert on terminating beverages, but you got to have a long one. And, at K1VR station I operate a lot, we have a 300-foot beverage, which is not extremely useful on 160. It's better than the transmit antenna, but it's decent on, you really want something closer to 800 or 1,000 foot or 600 foot even at a minimum on 160.
It has to be... The Wikipedia says it was invented by Harold H. Beveridge in 1921, and they have to be at least 1/2 wavelength, but most desirably like several wavelengths long. So at 160 meters, you got to be thinking like 600 feet. I've heard of a guy who has like an antenna which is literally a mile long, and it has like it's pointed right to Europe, and it's like I think it's just for 160, and he pulls in a high score, but I don't know. I forget his call sign. I don't know if he's still doing it, but I definitely heard the story out there.
I'm not sure if it's diminishing returns or if there's diminishing performance, but you really don't see many beverages longer than 1,000, 1,100, 1,200.
Back when they were doing it in 1921, apparently beverage long wave receiving antennas up to 9 miles had been installed in Riverhead, New York, Belfast, Maine. Yada, 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 for transatlantic radio telegraphy traffic. So that's crazy. That's a long antenna.
Yep. And so, 1,100 I think is pretty much the maximum I see these days. And a lot of them are staggered and phased. So you'll have they'll be staggered in their feed point location, and then they'll be phased together, maybe separated 1,000 feet apart. And those are known to be rather effective.
Nice. And then you can also have a bunch for every cardinal direction or semi-cardinal.
Or reversible. There's been a big push to beverages that are made out of RG6. Two pieces of RG6 to get a reversible beverage.
And RG6 is the cheap 75 ohm TV coax, yeah?
Yep. And also using 450 ohm slotted ladder line. And making reversible beverages with a reflection transformer at the far end.
And reversible just means that pattern, that null,
right,
you can change it to one side or the other. You don't have to just deal with one direction.
Yep, and that's often effective if you don't have room for multiple beverages. But we've really seen a push. I won't say beverages are going away, but you'll see a lot of the serious contesters these days are moving away from beverages in favor of things like short verticals. So 20, 30 feet, low or high impedance verticals, often in pairs of 2 or 4 or 6 or 7 or 8, phased together in a circle or a square or 9. I know some people who use 9. And they typically can outperform a beverage as far as RDF. And they they often take up similar footprint and are significantly more effective, and you can get more directions. Depending on the system, there's really short ones that are like 102-inch whips typically. They use a super high gain preamp at the base, gas fed, I believe. DX Engineering makes some of those, and they seem to work well. They're active. The issue you just run into there is you got to protect them on transmit and be very careful about that, so you're not getting RF from your transmit antenna. In general, beverages need to be far away.
Yeah,
as far as possible.
Far away from noise, far away from people, cows.
Transmit antenna, the transmit antenna, having an antenna, so you don't have RF coming back. And so those have to be protected. But a lot of people have been putting up those in 4 squares and 8 circles, or 2-element arrays, and phasing them together. And people have seen those to be working. And then in recent years, I think there's been a big push towards the 30-foot or 25-foot low and high impedance verticals, depending. And I know W3LPL and K3LR and KC1XX, some of the big multis in North America have been using those with great success.
Yeah, that must mean it's a good antenna.
Well, I think that means it's a good enough antenna. And I think
couldn't be better.
I think there's also something to be said for being able to manage 1 8-circle or 2 8-circles in the middle of a field compared to 10,000-foot beverages in the woods.
Yikes.
Which, if you have 10,000 feet of beverage to walk before every contest. Yeah.
Just hope you don't build it in an ice-ridden area like Missouri.
I've had to walk, what was it? I got stung by a bee's nest once, walking beverages.
Bee's nest?
Yeah, and I think beehive, excuse me. And it's also become...
I didn't think about that. Beehive, bee's nest, whatever. Wasp nest.
But also, especially in places like the Caribbean and the jungle, being able to rapidly deploy short verticals is a lot easier than stringing a long beverage.
Right. So that's why you see, de-expeditioners not worrying too much about like how long and how perfect their antenna is, just throwing up wire and trying to, hope that your amp will take care of the rest. So plus when you're out remote, you don't have any noise to deal with. So, why not use a vertical antenna?
Not always, but I think... I know the recent expedition to Navassa, not Navassa, the recent expedition to, or not so recent anymore, almost a year ago, to Palmyra Atoll, 1,000 miles or so off of Hawaii. They had terrible noise from one of their on-island buildings and ended up deploying what's called the shared apex loop, which is somewhat similar to like a K9AY. Mm-hmm. You used a K9AY before?
So, yeah, I tried building one. So with 160 meters came a lot of noise at W0 AAA, and I've done a lot of videos on the noise issue at W0 AAA at Missouri S&T. The problem is there's a big HVAC system up on the roof and a bunch of, obviously fluorescent lighting, LED lighting. There's a new solar panel array and a wind turbine just out in the courtyard to the, east of the shack. So all this contributes to a really, really, really high noise floor. And so since we couldn't really deal with the noise at the source, like we couldn't just say, hey, can you turn off the HVAC system? That'd be great. They wouldn't jive with that. So we looked into things like loop antennas, and we looked
magnetic
into
loops.
Things, magnetic loops, and the K9AY, which is what you were talking about, which is a sort of a bigger loop, a much bigger loop. See, basically a loop is literally just a loop of wire. Call it a wavelength long that comes around and terminates at the feed point. And you can have those vertically or horizontally, but they're, again, pretty big antennas for what they're worth.
For receiver antennas, they're pretty small.
Yeah.
But they're, compared to a 20-meter vertical, they're small.
A full-size loop isn't terrible at transmitting either. There's a friend of mine who has a full-size 160-meter loop, and he loves it. Loops are pretty... they're not as prone to noise.
Aren't the K9AY... loops only like 30 feet on a side?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can put them on a tower. They kind of like the verticals that you described earlier on the tower at your guys' place. Since you have like a center strut or center support, they come down on each side. I think
you really don't want to put them on your tower though, because they'll interact with all the other antennas, and you got to be very careful. But transmit RF getting back down into them.
But you can always use. A remote station, which is what you always been playing with. I know. I'm jealous. I wish I had a remote station. I wish I had a station, period. I'm in an apartment downtown, so I don't have much real estate for an antenna. But when I do, I go...
Well, when you're using a remote station, that doesn't make a difference. if you have to have an antenna that has good receiving areas and a good transmit antenna at that remote station.
Well, that's true.
On the other hand, there's a lot of people who unethically use remotes. And I know there's a lot of...
tune into a remote, hear your own station, hear your own signal, but you can also hear signals that you can't hear from your home station, and yeah, you definitely can't use both at the same time. But yeah, at W0EEE, it was super noisy, and we never really did get around to putting up a loop antenna permanently, but I played around.
Receive loop, like a short... we need to make sure we're distinguishing here, like short receive loop versus...
Yeah, and then there's also... loop. So there's the receive wire, let me call it like wire loops, which are bigger. Then which are like a wavelength of wire, a half wavelength of wire in total. Then you also have magnetic loops, which are like a very, very, very small, like micro wavelength size. Normally you make these out of like copper tubing or a lot of wire, because it corresponds directly to the bandwidth of these loops. The what this is called is Q, and to increase
that's
the Q,
like the thickness.
Yeah,
as it translates to
the thickness, and even in dipoles, you can increase the bandwidth or the Q, the quality factor, by increasing the radius of the conductor. And if you're using a loop antenna, the bandwidth is very, 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 very narrow. So you get a very small amount of spectrum. But if you widen up the conductor, you get a little bit more bandwidth. And if you had a really, really fat conductor on a dipole, you would get a super wide bandwidth. But typically don't do that since dipoles are very long, and 60, 100 feet of copper tubing would be pretty cost prohibitive.
But a lot of people, especially in like 80 and 160, will use things like a cage dipole with like 4 different or 6 different 14 gauge wires spread maybe a foot apart.
Mm-hmm. So they make an outline of a tube with wire, and they connect it all together, and it basically does the same thing for all intents and purposes. It looks
not
like
as well, not as well, but it approaches that point. And the one thing you got to think about when you're talking about Q. There's a lot of the commercial, Magic, all bands, free launch type antennas will have very, very low Q.
For example, like a ham stick.
Right. They'll be very, very low Q and very, very low efficiency.
Yep.
But very, very wide bandwidth. And that bandwidth can be deceiving. And a lot of people say, well, like especially with verticals, especially on 160, your verticals should have very narrow bandwidth. The resonance, the port, your low SWR region, I guess you could say, especially if you're just using a wire, should only be, it should be less than 50 kilohertz, I'd guess, or maybe even, or no more than 100 for sure. And a lot of people will say, well, mine is 300K wide, and I say, well, what are you using for a ground system? Oh yeah, I'm using a 20-foot radial that is duct taped to the coax 300 feet away.
Or I'm using the MFJ Magic Ground or something like that, like something that just
not to throw shade on MFJ. They make, I think,
it is mighty fine. Let me put it that way.
A lot of people. I'm gonna go on a rant here. A lot of people slam MFJ, and if you know what you're buying, they make really good products. And this is what I'm gonna say. MFJ fills a void in the hobby. There's a lot of people who wouldn't have stations of any capacity if it weren't for MFJ.
Absolutely.
And they may not be amazing, terrific, but they're pretty dang good for what you pay. They're the best value in ham radio
stuff. They might have some jiggly parts inside.
But I've never really had an issue. I know other people have, but I've never had an issue.
But then you just send your part back, and then you get a refund, or they go fix it for you. Like they're super.
I've never had an issue with them. The customer support is excellent. Everybody there is fantastic. The employees are actually terrific. And
and Martin will not steer you wrong.
Yeah, they're very, very
nice. The founder, I think, the CEO?
He founded it.
He's a cool guy.
I've talked to him. Very nice guy.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic company, and it's great to see, U.S.-made products still being sold in the ham radio market. I think
almost everybody has the antenna analyzer. Now that like cheaper Chinese things are coming out, I'm seeing more of like the U-kits types of stuff. But if I go ask, hey, I need to borrow your antenna analyzer, it's usually an MFJ
259 or 269.
Yeah, pretty ubiquitous, and they're good price. And if they break,
they're decent.
They'll fix them.
They'll fix them. They're nice. They're kind. What's
parts.
not to like?
Send us stuff. This is an unsolicited.
This is completely. Let's
opinion
make
piece.
Disclaimer. Let's be very clear. This is completely unsolicited. Solicit. Yeah. How do you say that? Solicited.
Solicited. It's the pronunciation corner on the phasing line.
Yeah,
I really need this up because, Justin will attest to how weird I pronounce things. For example, for the longest time, I pronounce hover.
Like a hoverboard?
Like a hoverboard. Oh, let's take our my hover skateboard. What was it called from Back to the Future? Is it a hoverboard?
Hey, I'm Marty from Back to the Future. I should know that.
That must make me Doc Brown. All right, we've been going on for a whopping 30 minutes of this technical babble. So we're going to take a quick break, and hopefully by the time you come back, your brain will be off the fryer and back into a nice comfy chair. So stay tuned on the Phasing Line Podcast.
The Phasing Line Podcast is brought to you by generous patrons at patreon.com. If you like what we do here every 2 weeks on the show, consider making a monthly reoccurring donation at phasinglinepodcast.com and click that big ol' Patreon button on the website. Or if you want, you can just go straight to the Patreon page, patreon.com/phasinglinepodcast, and make a donation. No donation is too small, but we really appreciate your support of the Phasing Line. And now let's go back to the show.
Welcome back to the Phasing Line Podcast. Thanks so much for sticking around with us. I had to go get a drink of water, and Marty had to move his mic 50 times.
I do that all the time. That's what the cool kids
all
do.
The time. Actually, this is surprising. He didn't move his mic for the first half hour of this podcast. You can really tell he's loving this technical stuff, jargon, and all of that because he's really into it. So now when I'm going to start taking over and talk about college radio and Yoda and APRS apps and this sort of stuff, he's going to be all over the place. Guarantee it.
So, college, what are we talking about?
So, as I alluded to, and as we were talking about a little while ago, W0EEE. Like you guys may know, was a big part of my life, and I talk about it all the time. And it's even such a big part of my life that now that I'm graduated, I'm still chained up with a ball and chain to the college club and collegiate amateur radio. And that's super fun. Not saying it's like I'm actually chained up or anything, but like it's super fun. And it's so exciting to be a part of, a big movement to help foster amateur radio in colleges.
I mean, I think it's great. The notion of like you're busy and you're in college, you're studying. I feel like that can induce like stress and craziness.
Ham radio is a stress reliever, unless you're, contesting like crazy. But then again.
Anyways, so college is important.
So college is important. And I've been going on and on about this, like, I guess, thing in my head where we're not just bringing ham radio to colleges. We're also bringing colleges to ham radio. We're not bringing, hams to ham radio. We're bringing ham radio to potential hams, potential, students or even faculty.
What percentage of, as we record this right now, what percentage of colleges in the U.S. do you think of the ham radio club? Just curious. I don't know.
It's like growing massively, but it's probably a very, very, very small percentage.
1%?
Maybe a little more. I don't know. I really don't have a good figure of merit.
Or how many? I think we should rephrase that. How many active?
But I know, yeah. So yeah, there's probably, if I'd take a guess, about 30 to 50 active ham radio clubs, and the number is like surprisingly growing fast because
and there's probably 200 including inactives in the country.
You can go to QRZ and do a club search, and if you type in college or university or school, then you can find like a whole list of colleges. And I've made a huge document, and there's probably like 200 schools on there of all the college, university, and high school amateur radio clubs. And I'm like slowly kind of going through it, getting contact information. There are like
the better part of 2,000 colleges in the U.S.
Yeah, that's right. And maybe 1% of them have a ham radio club. And as we're finding out with the ARRL started their Collegiate Amateur Radio Initiative, CARI, C-A-R-I, there's been like a huge influx of membership on their like Facebook page. And currently the only rendition, how CARI is showing itself, the initiative is on Facebook, and they also,
but there's more to come.
Yeah, they posted a QST article and a web article and all that stuff. So it's drawing a lot, and yes, there's more to come. And I don't know what more is to come since this is just starting. But really, we're setting a foundation up so that, everybody can collect their thoughts and ideas together, and hopefully that'll mesh into something and snowball into something really cool. And already I'm emailing quite a few people about different college activity ideas, different things to get your clubs active and more interested, and to get more members as well. So it's been, a lot of fun and pretty inspiring for the next generation.
It's only going to get better.
Yeah.
The next generation, what are you, like 55 now?
I'm an old man. Get
An
off
old
my
man.
lawn. That'll be
And
amazing.
I think, but here's a question. Maybe this is something we can discuss a little bit. When we talk about, the people getting into the hobby, the college people, what do you see? I mean, I haven't really experienced this firsthand, but what is the thing that's hooking people? I mean, I feel like it's sitting down on the radio and just making contacts and running guys and
I would
contests and sweepstakes. I mean,
I would say
these things seem exciting.
That's a big draw. But I think for the most of the people that come into ham radio in college, their parents were a ham or their grandpa was a ham, and they've had some experience. And it just takes that ham radio club to coalesce their experience into something to pursue even further. Now, there are quite a handful, like a ton of hams at WSHO Triple E who did contesting for the first time and never had any prior experience, and they were hooked. There are guys who were in the IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers.
The nerd club.
Yeah, for electrical engineers. And what we did a thing called hide and seek. We developed, designed, and built our own beacons and transmitters and receivers for a fox hunt. So you had a ton of beacons, like 50 of these transmitting beacons. They were just like super, super low power. They don't have a range of like maybe 10 to 20 feet.
Yep.
And you'd have a little receiver that would direction find them. You would only get bidirectional finding because it was so simple. It was like a $10 board. We only had a very limited budget, but it was super successful. Occasionally, I would poke in. It was at 3.686 megahertz. It was a really cheap crystal. I would poke in and send W0EEE really, really loud over that frequency, and everybody would hear it and would throw everybody off. And it was really funny. And the whole idea behind this, imagine the Easter egg hunt, but instead of Easter eggs like hidden, you have transmitters hidden. And this was really cool because then we could mesh a couple of cool ideas because S&T throws a big campus-wide Easter egg hunt every year. We thought that would be cool if we could put a little beacon inside them and use a little bit of radio directioning, orienteering techniques to find them. But basically, you would know that you're within like 20 feet to something, and then you'd start looking around the bushes and wait and poking your receiver around until you hear it really loudly, and then there it is. You'd open up the thing, you'd have a point and value in it, you save your points up, and then you use those to bid on the prizes like games and quadcopters and stuff like that. Unfortunately, homework answers were not a part of the prize list, but many people would have liked that.
Would have taken those. I think there's a lot of people who come in for things like, I don't know, I see this coming up more and more every day. Things like high altitude ballooning and remote data collection.
Something that made me laugh inside. You said high altitude.
What's an altitude?
Ribbit.
Is that a toad that alps? I don't know.
Putting a toad up 100,000 feet, see if it lives on the way down.
It's an altitude.
Frogs and toads are like really good.
They're different.
Freezing temperatures. But anyway, we tangentially digress.
But I don't think there's a lot of people who say, well, kids and young adults come in for like PSK, and I don't think that interesting. All the digital stuff, and I think that's just old timers having no idea.
Yeah, digital stuff's cool, but it's not. I don't think that's a real draw. And
I also think a lot of the digital stuff is really slow.
It's already antiquated, right?
And it's also just like slow, like PSK and RIDI, or I can run guys on phone 100 times faster. And I mean, I think they actually attract more old men who can't think that fast than college students.
I totally agree with you. A lot of guys use it as a you can IM with Facebook. Well, did you know you can IM with ham radio? Look at this, and he types out something, and it takes 5 days to send, and it's just like, oh, well, this is no fun. I really think there's like a mistaken idea of what that brings to a young person. Now, there's some really cool stuff on the table, and I'll go ahead and talk about it because it's starting to get on the table. Something called Faraday RF. It's a little RF board that will transmit and receive at 930 megahertz. It's the part 15 and the part 97 band for 33 centimeters, and that's part 15.
So can you set the power so you can use it for part 15 or crank it up and use it for part 97?
Yeah, exactly. And it uses like a real low cost transmitter chip, a real low cost common off the shelf. I think it's an MSP 430 microcontroller. Uses RESTful APIs on the web. It's a really cool thing, and the idea is to bring the idea of digital communication into the realm of the hacker, the hobbyist, the student, that sort of stuff. Because right now, like digital modes are like PSK31 and FSK and this sort of stuff. And that's one small slice of the pie. It's slow, it's antiquated. We need something faster. And so that's what Faraday RF is trying to do. It's trying to educate, and it's trying to, augment and revolutionize. Let me use some big hand wavy words. The digital amateur radio spectrum. I mean, we do have D-Star and DMR and Yaesu System Fusion, all that stuff. But those are, I guess, appliances. And this is like the first like homegrown, homebrewed like board for digital data transmission. And it's got so much ahead of it: meshing, high altitude ballooning, data transmission, even APRS, because APRS is just the same. It's really slow, really old analog. The protocol is really ancient, designed in the 70s. And now we have all these things called the internet, which makes it really fast. Even just a couple of days ago, I was really sad. I posted on Reddit that the EPRS, a lot of apps don't support emoji because they don't support UTF-8 Unicode, which made me sad. And everybody talked about, we don't need those. You can use regular emojis. And I'm like, that's not the point. The point is we need to be agile and fast, and we need to develop just like we are today. So that's what they're trying to do. I had a little bit of a part.
It's like people who develop software and then don't touch it for 5 years. Mm-hmm. It becomes obsolete.
So Bryce and Brent Salmi, the GXT brothers from K2GXT, I think it's KB2LQC and KB2LQD, maybe KC2, I forget, I'll show notes it. They're the main guys. They're working at SpaceX right now, so they're really cool. But I can't imagine how they're building this. They've been doing it over the last 3 years, I suppose, so it's been real spread out. They also work on AMSAT and stuff. And then they also build freaking rocket ships, so they're pretty cool guys. And they're starting, everything's on GitHub. They're starting to release a little bit of information. They have a website, FaradayRF.com. There's some, YouTube videos and stuff. And I think that's just super, super cool. And a lot of colleges, a lot of high altitude balloonists, I think everybody's going to love it.
Yeah, and I think there's the other thing, I just think there's a lot of people who are attracted to that. Design it your own. Here's a framework. Mm-hmm. Without saying the hard part is done for you. Now take your wildest imaginations and actually focus not on the hardware, but developing really powerful software.
Yeah, and this is the whole idea of software-defined radio. With the RTL-SDR, some genius, I think it was a Finnish guy, came up with the idea of sending raw data over USB, raw baseband RF over USB, and this completely revolutionized ham radio. I would have to say it's completely changed the game playing field. Look at this ICOM 7300, look at the Flex Radio series. All of that is because ham's got a hold of software-defined technology, receiver, transmitter architecture, and it's taking everything by storm. And that's exactly where we need to go. We're just super slow at it because, you better believe that the cell phone industry, the military industry, the commercial industry, they're all starting to get leaps and bounds ahead of ham radio. So we need to find where ham radio can do this again, or maybe it can't. Maybe we need to just evolve ham radio into ham radio 2.0, where we're doing newer things, using ham radio as a tool rather than using ham radio as an adventure into designing new RF stuff. And that will always exist. But RF is mostly a solved problem until we get into quantum theory. So it's right now the best learning tool, the best educational tool I think that we can have to offer for STEAM or STEM majors. We talked about that last time or time before last. And so that's why colleges really need to get in on this ham radio bandwagon. It's super fun for both your spending time and de-stressing, and it's also exactly what you need for a career in ham radio, or not a career in ham radio, but a career in engineering, whether it's electrical or chemical or English engineering. I don't think English engineering is a thing, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure.
And networking is super, super great in ham radio too. I met Ward Silver, and look where I am, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Ward Silver is awesome. I think we should say that to start, but you can't deny it. But I think one of the cool things, or one of the things I keep thinking about is kind of SDR, and you kind of hit the nail on the head. There's been this kind of push for, the very open sourcey, build your own SDR. But I think, especially with the introduction of, say, we the Flex radios, which were kind of off the shelf SDRs, but very, I don't know what the right word is, very SDR-y. You had to use a computer.
They were and then they had a waterfall and all of the big band spread.
And now, to see like what ICOM is doing with the 7300, for example, which is, an SDR with knobs, which to me just blows my mind. You don't need to lug a computer around.
What's even more mind-blowing is that the other like big three and Elecraft even are just, well, I guess Elecraft have a plug for it, and Elecraft has the pan adapter and thing, but the other guys haven't gotten that far.
Right. I mean, and I'll say that, I'm not going to throw shade on all the radio manufacturers, but I will say, I think ICOM's kind of pushing the front of it. Like, they're not stupid. Whereas, and, I think Yaesu's paid a little bit of attention to the amateur line, but look what Kenwood's done. I mean, I think Kenwood's ham market is probably less than 1% of their sales.
Yeah.
Probably a fraction of 1%.
They've been making good radios, no problems there, but I mean, they're just
they're not staying on their class. I mean, I think Kenwood's product line is morphing in a direction what will really be, I mean, if I were Kenwood right now, I would stop focusing their efforts on the HF radios and start working on their VHF radios where they haven't done too bad.
Because their handhelds and
their handhelds are good. Their mobiles are good.
I mean, not only good, like the D74 is like, so I think Kenwood did a good thing with the D74 in that it enveloped all of the ham radio functionality like D-Star and APRS and whatever else. It's a huge radio in a little tiny package. It's pretty expensive, but they're doing pretty good, I think. I
mean, and I look at things like the one thing that I love that I was disappointed to not see on the D74 is like on the ICOM's ID51. I have like the GPS memories for all the repeaters, with the repeater book built in, and that like it seems like a stupid feature, but it's so helpful.
Oh, that's not stupid. That's like the best idea. Like
that is like the best feature that I've ever had in a handy talkie. Like, can't go back.
I wish every radio could have Bluetooth in it and attach to my phone and then get the repeater book database like downloaded just like that. I mean, we're not quite there yet, and I'm trying to work on like little side projects to see if I can build something like that, but everything's hard. Learning software programming when you're a hardware guy is like the hardest thing in the world because you can't, burn anything and catch anything on fire. It just kind of breaks in your computer and it's,
it's done.
There's no feedback. It doesn't make me feel good that I burnt, feel bad, really bad that I burnt something like a resistor or something.
And the other thing is like, just to think about like SDR, like I think radio manufacturers need to look to the future, and I think ICOM's done that, and we'll see what happens. They have a great radio, the 7600, the 7610, which is basically a souped up 7300, I think.
Yeah.
Which will be super cool.
Another thing these guys need to do is look at lowering the cost, because Chinese radios are really, really pushing on the
There's no good Chinese radios.
Market. I mean, they're not good, but they're cheap, and that is all that matters to
But for me, like, I could never contest with a Chinese anything. But look at, like, I was able to hold the frequency on 40-meter phone with Europeans on all sides of me and CQ Worldwide phone using an ICOM 7300, which is a $1,000 radio.
And currently, I mean, there's nothing like that on the Chinese market.
There's nothing like that on any market.
There will be. There will be very soon. I'm like almost certain of it. And they got to I'm sure they're aware of it. But you got to look at it.
There will not be a time when there will be, I think it's hard to believe that there'll be a time when the Chinese will be able to really do what the Japanese manufacturers are doing. I don't see it happening.
Well, no,
they may be able to do it, but they won't do it.
They won't be able to get up to like the par that, ICOM would bring. But like, look at how they're getting into the HT and handheld market.
I mean, I look at the massive failure that was the Bofeng just launched the DM5R, which was their DMR radio for like $50. And it turned out to be a colossal failure because the whole cool thing about DMR is you can use TDMA and CDMA?
Yeah,
time domain
for two channels. You can have two channels
slots
on one frequency.
Two time slots.
And it turns out that it doesn't work. It don't work, Jim.
The Chinese, the DM5R, which recently came out, transmits on both time slots at the same time. And if you link that to, say, like a global network, it'll screw it up so badly. It's a complete, colossal misfire.
I mean, I guess lose some and you win some, and they really won big with the amateur radio, like VHF, just plain HD market. So,
but they're not really, even legal,
their feet out. I know, but we still buy them, and the FCC hasn't stopped us. And if we really have a problem with them, and I was talking about this a while ago, last week on the internet, debating on the internet as I do, and a lot of people have problems with Baofeng handhelds but they go to the internet and they complain and complain and complain, but they never realize like they need to complain to the FCC, because if they don't have complaints, nobody will do anything about it. You'll keep getting Bafings on the market.
But if you, I guess, my two things are, look how dirty they are. I mean, if you put one on a spectrum analyzer, you're practically vomiting.
But beware, you're putting it on a spectrum analyzer through a cable. If you're just putting the antenna on, don't forget the antenna is a filter too. And so, I mean, yes, they're really poorly built. They're really bad. The filters are not filtering, but the poor antenna is doing part of that job. And so far, there hasn't been a huge number of complaints. Like there's been a little bit of interference. There's been things happening in India where guys are jamming airports, and there's been places in Indianapolis and New York where we're jamming. These guys are jamming police services. And
which is completely unokay for the record.
It's totally not okay, but what is the FCC doing about it? And if these radios are really bad, the FCC needs to take care of it and nip it in the bud, or else.
Well, I think there's three words for that: lack of funding.
No, it's not just funding.
It's time. It's staffing. They're cutting staff. They're shutting down locations.
Complaints. Because the FCC, I mean, they are in charge of every single thing that comes in, that radiates. And so they should take care of things that are radiating poorly. And sure, it's certified. It was certified and this and that, but it's caused such a big media uproar. Ham radio media uproar.
The Chinese units aren't even Part 97 certified.
Right. They're Part 90, but you can use ham radio things for Part 90 certified, for Part 97. And there's no real Part 97 certification, is there? Or am I wrong?
There is.
Well, there you go. Something needs to be done, but nothing's being done. So it makes me think, okay, maybe there's no funding, but also maybe there's no complaints. Where is the real problems? Who are having the who's getting interfered by? Who's on the third harmonic of most ham bands that is getting interfered by? Are they getting interfered? Do they know who to complain to? If they are, instead of saying, get off my frequency, who knows? So maybe in the next 2-3 years, we'll find out. And that's interesting.
Okay, well, Sterling, I think that was pretty cool. But we will see. I don't know. Whew. Enforcement will be interesting, and I think Laura kind of has it all figured out. Maybe what I just said was really idiotic. I do not know.
We'll find out. See, you can direct all hate mail to Marty, all official Observer green slips to myself. I think our email is changing to contact@phasingline.com, but stay tuned to the Facebook and the website and all that stuff to make sure, because I don't want to pay $5 a month for 2 different emails if all we need is one and this and that and the other thing. But I don't know. Yeah, let's figure it out and go from there.
But thanks so much for coming back this week. And in 2 weeks from now, as always, we will have another episode of the Phasing Line podcast. In the meantime, remember to hit up our website, which is phasinglinepodcast.com.
And check out our Patreon at patreon.com/phasinglinepodcast, or click the big red Patreon button and become our patron.
As much as we keep bugging this Patreon thing, we really cannot be losing this much money. So please help us. Please.
We'd appreciate it, and we enjoy it. And how many? So far, how many have subscribed or patroned?
I believe we have 3 people giving $7 a month, and at the end of this month, every month we'll read their names. But those 3 people, it's small donations like that add up. But we really, really appreciate.
That's $7 more than we didn't have 5 minutes ago, and that's super, super appreciated.
That's $84 a year. Mm-hmm. Doesn't at all cover our expenses, but it's a start in the right direction.
Yeah. All right, we won't beat this horse to death. Hopefully the interstitial not ads, but the what do we want to call them? Spots, solicitations. Please help us. Oh goodness, we're drowning.
We're poor young hams.
They won't last long, and hopefully they're not too invasive. Let us know if they are, and we'll take care of it. All right, Marty.
That was great. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. This is the Phasing Line Podcast. Bye-bye for now.